The annual company gala was in full swing. I stood near the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey. My wife, Natalie, was somewhere in the crowd, and I had spent the better part of the evening scanning the room, trying to catch a glimpse of her. The sound of jazz music filled the ballroom, and the clinking of glasses created a steady rhythm beneath the hum of conversations. People moved in elegant waves, their laughter and polite chatter bouncing off the walls. For weeks, things between us had been strained. We hardly spoke at home. Her smiles had become rare, and the warmth between us had turned to something colder, distant. Tonight, I hope we could talk, maybe reconnect. That was the entire reason I had agreed to come to this gala with her, despite my better judgment. But as the minutes ticked by, I hadn't seen her. Then I spotted her. Near the dance floor, she stood close to Richard, her boss. Too close. The sight of her radiant smile, the way she laughed at something he said, made my gut churn. Richard had always been around, always too familiar with her, but I never let it bother me. I trusted Natalie, or at least I had. But now something felt off. My grip tightened around the glass as I watched them from a distance. I saw Richard lean in closer to her, whispering something into her ear. Natalie tilted her head back and laughed, the sound grating on me. Her hand slid up his arm, lingering for a moment too long. I told myself it was just a casual gesture. I had no reason to doubt her. I had no proof of anything. But then, she said something that made the ground beneath me feel like it shifted. He thinks I'm his little wife. Poor hubby, I'm not his property. Natalie's voice was low, but just audible enough as she leaned closer to Richard. I strained to hear, disbelief clouding my mind. I'm an independent woman. I don't need that loser keeping tabs on me. If he doesn't find out, no harm done. My breath caught in my throat, my mind racing to make sense of what I'd just heard. Had I misheard? Had she really just said that? A mocking smirk tugged at the corners of her mouth as she turned to face Richard. Before I could process what was happening, she trailed a finger down his chest in a slow, deliberate motion, and then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, kissed him. I froze. It wasn't a peck or an accidental brush of lips. It was deliberate, purposeful. Their lips locked for what felt like an eternity, and when they finally broke apart, they exchanged a conspiratorial glance, chuckling softly. Natalie glanced around, as if ensuring no one had seen. But I had, and the world around me seemed to blur in that moment. A dark, slow-burning rage began building inside me, but I didn't move. Every instinct screamed at me to confront them, to tear them apart right there in front of everyone. But I didn't. I wasn't that kind of man. I didn't do impulsive. I did calculated, controlled. As if in some sick play, they giggled like school children and, with another shared glance, made their way towards the restrooms. Together, my eyes followed them, a twisted sense of detachment taking over. I stood still, gripping my glass tighter until my knuckles turned white, watching them disappear through the hallway. I didn't follow. Instead, I took a deep breath, trying to steady the rising storm in my chest. They were gone for several minutes. My mind wandered, painting vivid pictures of what was happening in that bathroom. My wife, the woman I had loved and built a life with, was in there with another man, doing God knows what. And she had the nerve to call me a loser, as if I was some joke in her life. I felt a hollow ache in my stomach, but I forced myself to stay calm. Exploding now would do me no favors. No, I needed to think. Natalie had made her choice, and I wasn't going to beg for explanations or grovel for her affection. No, I had something much better in mind. They came out a short while later, smiling like nothing had happened. They walked back into the crowd, rejoining the festivities as if they hadn't just shared a moment of betrayal. I watched as they went back to mingling, acting like everything was normal. Natalie caught sight of me then, her expression briefly flickering into one of guilt, but she quickly masked it with a tight smile. "There you are," she said as she approached, her voice light, her eyes scanning my face for any sign that I might have noticed. "I've been looking for you. Are you having fun?" I stared at her, my mind a whirlwind of emotions, but I kept my face impassive. "Yeah," I replied, taking another sip of my whiskey, just watching the night go by. Her eyes searched mine for any hint of suspicion, but I gave her none. If she thought she had gotten away with it, I was happy to let her believe that, at least for now. Natalie leaned in, pressing a quick kiss on my cheek, the scent of her perfume filling my nostrils. It made me sick. I'm going to chat with a few more people, she said, her voice casual, like we were just another married couple enjoying a night out. I'll catch up with you in a bit. Sure, I replied, forcing a smile. Take your time. She lingered for a moment, as if expecting something more from me. But when I didn't give it, she turned and walked back towards the crowd, her crimson gown flowing elegantly behind her. I watched her go, my mind already formulating a plan. This wasn't the moment to confront her. No, this was the moment to wait, to let the weight of what she had done settle. As the night wore on, I played my part. I mingled with co-workers, smiled when necessary, and acted as if nothing had changed. But inside, I was seething. Every time I caught sight of Natalie and Richard, it was a reminder of the betrayal she thought I hadn't seen. But I had seen, and she would pay for it. When the gala finally began to wind down, Natalie found me again, this time more subdued, as if the alcohol had finally worn off. Ready to go home? She asked, her voice softer. Yeah, I said, grabbing my coat. Let's go. The ride home was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I glanced at her once or twice, wondering how long she had been carrying on with Richard. How many lies had she told me over the years? But I didn't ask. Not yet. There'd be time for that later. When we pulled into the driveway, Natalie was half asleep, her head resting against the window. She stirred as I turned off the engine. I'm so tired, she mumbled, stretching as she stepped out of the car. I think I'll just crash as soon as we get inside. The front door clicked shut behind us, the soft thud barely registering over Natalie's drunken giggles. She leaned against the hallway wall, kicking off her heels and letting them clatter to the floor. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, but she didn't seem to care. She stumbled toward the bedroom, muttering something incoherent, and I followed, every step a reminder of the betrayal from just hours earlier. She collapsed onto the bed without a word, curling up in the covers like nothing had happened. The room was dark except for the faint moonlight streaming in through the curtains. I watched her for a moment, her breathing already slow and steady as she drifted into sleep. It amazed me how easily she could slip into this peace after what she'd done. The silence between us was deafening. Normally, we'd at least exchange a few words before bed, even if things were tense, but tonight there was nothing. Just her soft snores, and the lingering scent of perfume mixed with alcohol. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, watching her sleep, my mind racing. I could still see her with Richard in the ballroom, the way she clung to him, kissed him, whispered things she thought I'd never hear. My fists clenched, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. Exploding wouldn't get me what I wanted. Revenge, real revenge, required patience. After an hour, when I was certain she wouldn't wake up, I quietly got to my feet. I moved slowly, careful not to make a sound as I grabbed my jacket from the chair. Natalie didn't stir, and I slipped out of the bedroom, shutting the door behind me. The house was eerily quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock as I walked through the living room, heading for the garage. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need them. My mind was focused on what needed to be done. Richard's office wasn't far. I knew the route well. He worked late, often staying long after everyone else had gone home. It was how he and Natalie had likely gotten close, long hours together, no one watching. I pulled up the hood of my jacket as I got into the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I knew Richard, knew his habits, his routines. He was careless in a lot of ways. His personal life was a mess, and from the rumors floating around, his professional life wasn't much better. But I had never acted on any of that before tonight. Why? Maybe because I didn't care enough. But now I had the perfect reason. When I arrived at Richard's office, the building was dark, the parking lot almost empty. I parked a short distance away and walked the rest of the way. Richard always had a spare key under the large potted plant by his office door. He had joked about it once during a company party, like it was the funniest thing in the world. I reached down, lifting the plant, and there it was, the key, gleaming faintly in the dim light. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door opened with a soft click, and I stepped inside, shutting it behind me. The office was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I knew where everything was. Richard's desk was cluttered with papers, files, and his laptop. I ignored the mess and went straight for the drawer on the left. I had seen him open it before, casually stashing away sensitive documents like they didn't matter. The drawer wasn't locked. I pulled it open and found exactly what I was looking for: folders thick with papers that had no business being in an unlocked drawer. Financial records, contracts, emails printed out for no reason other than Richard's laziness. I flipped through them, recognizing the names of clients, the dates of deals that didn't match up with what had been officially reported to the company. Embezzlement, misappropriation of funds. It was all here, laid out in black and white. I paused for a moment, staring at the pile of incriminating evidence. Richard had been playing fast and loose with the company's money for a long time, and it wouldn't take much to expose him. But tonight wasn't just about exposing Richard's professional incompetence. This was about destroying the man who had dared to cross a line with my wife. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos of the documents, one by one, page after page, file after file, until I had everything I needed. I'd send these to the right people in the morning, the board members, the company's legal team. Once they saw this, Richard would be done. His career would be over, and there'd be no coming back from it. But I wasn't finished. I went to his laptop next. It wasn't password protected, another oversight by a man who thought he was untouchable. I opened his email, scrolling through the recent messages. Sure enough, there were emails from Natalie. They weren't explicit, but the flirtation was clear. Dates, times they had met up. I forwarded them to myself, knowing they'd be useful later. As I sat in his chair, the weight of what I was doing started to settle in. This wasn't just about getting back at Natalie for her betrayal. This was about dismantling the lives they had tried to build behind my back. They thought they could play me, that I wouldn't see what was happening. But now I held all the cards, and I intended to play them well. I spent the next hour combing through Richard's computer, collecting more dirt, more pieces of the puzzle that I could use. By the time I was finished, I had everything I needed. His dirty little secrets, his affair with Natalie, his financial misdeeds. It was all in my hands. As I stood up, I glanced around the office one last time. Richard's carelessness had been his downfall. He had made it too easy. I picked up one of the folders from his desk and stuffed it into my jacket. He wouldn't notice it was missing until it was too late. Slipping out of the office, I locked the door behind me and replaced the key under the plant. The night air was cool as I walked back to my car, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. I had the power now, and tomorrow, everything would change. When I got home, the house was just as quiet as I had left it. Natalie was still fast asleep, unaware of what I had done. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a moment, watching her, wondering how she could sleep so peacefully knowing what she had done. I placed a folder on my desk in the study, careful to hide it from sight. Tomorrow, I'd confront her. Tomorrow, the facade would come crashing down, and she'd see just how badly she had miscalculated. I climbed into bed beside her, not touching her, not saying a word. My mind was already planning the next steps, the moves that would destroy her and Richard once and for all. By morning, everything would be different. As I lay there, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breathing, I smiled to myself. She thought she had gotten away with it, that her secret was safe. But she had no idea the storm that was coming. And when it hit, she wouldn't know what had destroyed her life. Natalie groaned as she slowly stirred awake, her head pounding from the aftermath of last night's drinking. The faint rays of morning sunlight crept through the curtains, teasing her eyes open. Her mouth felt dry, her body heavy with exhaustion, but there was an odd, uneasy feeling lingering in the back of her mind. She rolled over in bed, expecting to feel the warmth of her husband next to her, but the space was empty. Instead, her eyes landed on something she didn't expect: her suitcases. 3 of them, neatly packed and stacked by the door. She blinked, confused at first, her sluggish brain trying to process what she was seeing. "What the?" she muttered groggily, sitting up. The moment she turned her head, she saw it. A note, folded neatly and placed on the bedside table. Her heart skipped a beat, a cold dread creeping into her chest. With trembling hands, she reached for the note, her fingers fumbling as she unfolded it. The message was blunt, cruel, and devastating. "Bitch, you have until midnight to leave. Otherwise, I'm gonna expose you and your little lover boy. Your game's over." Natalie's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening as she stared at the words. Her heart pounded in her chest, the panic rising rapidly. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, her voice shaky. "This can't be happening." She scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over the sheets as she got to her feet. Her head swam, and for a moment, she had to steady herself against the wall, the hangover making it hard to think straight. But the fear coursing through her body was more than enough to push her forward. Frantically, she stumbled toward the living room, her thoughts racing. Was this real? Was he serious? She couldn't believe it. Daniel, her husband, had always been so mild-mannered, so quiet. He never gave any sign that he knew about her affair with Richard. And Richard, he wasn't supposed to be involved in this. It was supposed to be their secret. But as she burst into the living room, the sight that greeted her confirmed her worst nightmare. There, sprawled across the couch, was Richard. His shirt was rumpled, his tie loosened, and he was unconscious, his arm hanging off the side of the couch. In his hand was a manila folder, the papers inside slipping out slightly. Natalie's heart dropped when she saw it. She knew exactly what was in that folder. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the back of the couch for support, her breathing erratic. Oh my God! Oh my God! This wasn't just a simple confrontation. This was her entire life unraveling before her eyes. She rushed to Richard's side, shaking his shoulder desperately. "Richard! Richard, wake up!" she hissed, her voice panicked. He didn't stir. She shook him harder, her pulse racing. "Richard, wake up!" she repeated, louder this time. But still, he remained unresponsive. Her mind whirled with confusion. How did he end up here? What had Daniel done? Had he drugged him? She grabbed the folder from his limp hand, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The first few pages sent a cold chill through her spine. Financial records, emails, photos, it was all there. Every shady deal Richard had been involved in, every message they had exchanged, every trace of their affair. "No, no, no!" Natalie's voice cracked as she flipped through the pages. This can't be happening. The realization hit her like a freight train. Daniel had been watching. He had known all along. And now he had everything. The evidence, the power, the control, it was all in his hands. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she stood up, backing away from the couch. Her mind was racing, desperate to find a way out. She glanced around the room, as if expecting Daniel to appear from the shadows at any moment. But he was nowhere to be seen. The house was eerily quiet, save for her own labored breathing. She rushed back into the bedroom, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she grabbed her phone from the nightstand. She needed to call someone, anyone, maybe a lawyer, maybe someone who could help. She couldn't let Daniel destroy her like this. She couldn't let everything she had built come crashing down because of one mistake. Her fingers fumbled over the screen as she dialed Richard's number, hoping against hope that he would somehow wake up and answer. But as she stared at the unconscious man on the couch, she knew it was pointless. The call went to voicemail, and she cursed under her breath. "Think, Natalie, think," she muttered to herself, pacing back and forth. She couldn't just leave. Not like this. She needed to talk to Daniel, to try and fix this, to convince him not to go through with his threats. Maybe there was still a chance to salvage everything. Maybe he hadn't sent the evidence out yet. Without wasting another second, she bolted toward the front door. Her mind was in overdrive, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to find Daniel. She had to talk to him, to beg for his forgiveness, if that's what it took. She reached for the doorknob, her hands trembling so badly that it took her 2 tries to open the door. As she stepped outside, the bright morning light hit her, momentarily blinding her. She squinted, her head pounding from the hangover, and the adrenaline flooding her veins made her feel nauseous. But she couldn't stop now. She wouldn't let her life fall apart without a fight. She hurried to the driveway, her eyes scanning the street for any sign of Daniel. But his car was gone. He wasn't home. Panic surged through her again. Where could he be? What was he planning? Had he already left to expose her and Richard to the company, to their friends, to the world? "Daniel," she called out into the empty driveway, her voice cracking. But there was no response. Only the quiet suburban street, mocking her with its normalcy. She clutched her phone tightly, her fingers hovering over the call button. Should she try calling him? Would he even answer? What if he was already at the company, handing over the evidence? Her mind spun with possibilities, each one worse than the last. With shaking hands, she dialed his number. It rang once, twice, and then went straight to voicemail. "Daniel, please," she pleaded into the phone, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this. Let's talk, okay? I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Please, just come home and we'll figure this out. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't ruin us." She ended the call, her heart sinking as she realized how desperate she sounded. But there was no other option. Daniel held all the cards now, and if she didn't find a way to stop him, her life would be over by the end of the day. Natalie collapsed onto the front steps, her head in her hands as the weight of her situation finally sank in. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next, but all she could feel was the crushing realization that her world was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As she sat there, the morning air cool against her skin, a single, terrifying thought echoed in her mind. She was out of time. The door swung open with a loud bang, and Natalie's frantic voice cut through the air. "Daniel," she screamed, her footsteps pounding against the hardwood floor as she rushed into the bedroom. Tears streamed down her face, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her unravel in front of me. She dropped to her knees, grabbing at my legs like a lifeline. "Please, please, we can fix this," she begged, her voice hoarse. "I made a mistake. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. I love you, I swear." Her words were frantic, tumbling out of her mouth as if the more she said, the quicker she could undo the damage she had caused. But I didn't move. I didn't blink. I simply stared at her, my expression hard as stone. The woman who had so arrogantly dismissed me last night now knelt in front of me, pleading for mercy. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Fix it," I finally said, my voice low and calm. Too calm. "You think after what I saw, after what I heard, there's anything left to fix? Do you have any idea how long you've been lying to me? You betrayed everything we had, Natalie. Everything." She sobbed harder, her tears soaking into my pants as she clung to me. "I was lost, Daniel. It didn't mean anything, I swear. It was a stupid mistake. Please, please give me another chance. I'll do anything." Her voice cracked as she spoke, desperation seeping into every word. Her grip tightened around my legs, as though holding on to me could somehow hold on to the life she was so afraid of losing. I knelt down in front of her, lifting her chin with my hand, forcing her tear-streaked face to meet mine. Her eyes, swollen from crying, looked at me with a mix of fear and hope, but I felt nothing. The rage that had burned so fiercely inside me the night before was now a cold, sharp blade of clarity. She wasn't begging because she loved me. She was begging because she had been caught. "You're going to pay for this, Natalie," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but each word hit her like a punch to the gut. "I don't want your apologies. I don't want your tears. I want you gone. By midnight." Her eyes widened in terror, her lips trembling. "No, Daniel, please don't do this. Don't throw everything away. I can change. We can work through this. Please don't destroy me." I straightened up, my hand dropping from her chin as I stood. "Destroy you?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided I wasn't enough. And now, you're going to face the consequences." I turned my back on her, moving toward the door. Behind me, I heard her sobs grow louder, more desperate. She scrambled to her feet, rushing toward me, her hands grabbing at my arm. "No, wait," she cried, trying to pull me back. "You can't do this. You can't ruin my life like this, Daniel. Please. I'll lose everything. My job, my reputation, everything." "That's the idea," I replied coldly, shaking her off. I stepped out of the bedroom, leaving her behind. Her cries echoed down the hallway as I walked away, but I didn't stop. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me hesitate. I made my way into the living room, my mind already focused on the next steps. The manila folder with Richard's secrets was still sitting on the coffee table where I had left it. I glanced at the clock. There were still hours before the deadline I had given her, but I wasn't worried. She could beg and plead all she wanted, but her time was up. Behind me, I heard her footsteps again, slower this time, as she followed me into the room. "Daniel, please," she whispered, her voice broken, barely a shadow of the woman who had mocked me just the night before. "I can't lose everything. I know I messed up, but you don't have to do this." I turned to face her, my arms crossed. "And why shouldn't I?" She hesitated, her lips quivering as she searched for an answer. Because I love you," she finally said, her voice barely audible. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Love? You think this is about love? You didn't think about love when you were with Richard. You didn't think about me at all. So don't stand there and tell me you love me now, just because you're scared." Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I was confused. I wasn't thinking straight. "Please just give me another chance. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off all contact with Richard. We can start over. Please, Daniel, don't ruin us." I shook my head, feeling the weight of her words slide right off me. "There is no us anymore, Natalie. You ended that. The only thing left for you to do now is pack your bags and leave. By midnight, you're out of here." She dropped her head into her hands, her body shaking with sobs. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whimpered, her voice barely a whisper. "What am I supposed to do?" I shrugged. "That's not my problem anymore." I turned away again, heading toward the door. I had nothing left to say to her. She had made her choices, and now she had to deal with the consequences. Before I reached the door, I heard her footsteps again, faster this time. She rushed to me, grabbing my arm with more force than before. "Wait," she cried, her voice sharp with desperation. "Don't tell the company. Please. I'll lose everything. Richard, he'll lose everything too. You don't have to do this." I stopped, turning to look at her one last time. "You didn't think about that before you slept with him," I said, my voice cold and flat. "Now you both get to live with the fallout." She let go of my arm, her hands dropping to her sides as if the fight had drained out of her completely. Her shoulders slumped, her body trembling as she realized there was nothing she could do to change my mind. "Please, Daniel," she whispered one last time, her voice weak, defeated. But I didn't answer. I simply walked out the door, leaving her standing in the middle of the room, broken and alone. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The betrayal, the lies, it was all out in the open now. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Natalie's cries were muffled through the walls, but I didn't look back. She had made her bed. Now, she would have to lie in it. And when midnight came, her world would come crashing down for good. Richard stirred, his head pounding as if a hammer had struck it repeatedly. The sunlight piercing through the curtains felt like needles stabbing into his skull. Groaning, he pressed his palms against his temples, trying to force the hangover away. He hadn't drunk that much, had he? It had been a blur. Natalie by his side, laughing, their stolen moments away from prying eyes. But something else lingered in the back of his mind, an unsettling feeling he couldn't shake. He blinked hard, trying to clear his vision, and that's when he saw her, Natalie, sitting on the floor by the couch, her knees drawn up to her chest, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she stared at him as if she were waiting for a death sentence. "Morning," he muttered, voice rough from a night of alcohol and little sleep. He rubbed his face, trying to piece together why she looked so distraught. That's when he felt the weight in his hand. Slowly, he looked down and noticed the folder resting on his lap. His groggy mind couldn't process it at first. He flipped it open casually, expecting some routine paperwork or notes from the office. But the first page made his blood freeze. "What the hell is this?" Richard croaked, sitting up quickly. He fumbled through the documents, his fingers trembling as he recognized his emails, showing money transfers, shady business deals, and worse, intimate messages between him and Natalie. It was all there, laid out in explicit detail. Every misstep, every illicit move he'd thought was hidden from the world. Natalie flinched at his reaction, her voice barely a whisper. "He did it? Daniel found everything. Richard's mind was reeling. How the hell did he get his hands on this? His voice was rising, panic edging into every syllable. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear himself think. This was not just evidence of an affair. This was enough to ruin him, personally, professionally, utterly. I don't know, Natalie replied, her voice shaky. She looked up at him, eyes red and swollen. He found out about us last night, and he's going to destroy us. Richard stood, suddenly wide awake, his hands clutching the folder as if it might disappear. No, no, no. He shook his head, walking back and forth like a caged animal. This can't be happening. There's got to be a way out of this. He reached for his phone on the coffee table, hoping beyond hope that he could contain this before it got worse. The screen lit up, and his heart sank further. Dozens of missed calls, emails, and messages flooded his phone. Most were from the company board members, a few from his lawyer, and one from his wife. The last call alone made his throat tighten, but he couldn't bring himself to open any of them. "What did you do, Richard?" Natalie asked in a near whisper, watching his panic spiral out of control. She stood, crossing the room cautiously, but her presence was barely registered by Richard. He swiped through the messages, the sense of dread growing with each one. How did this? A call came through just then. Richard stared at the screen, recognizing the name. His heart skipped a beat. It was his lawyer, Alex. Without thinking, he answered, putting the phone to his ear. "Richard." Alex's voice was strained, laced with frustration and urgency. "What the hell is going on? The board's about to tear you apart. They've been hit with evidence of your indiscretions and financial misconduct. I've been fielding calls all morning, but this is bad. Very bad." Richard could barely form the words. How? How did they get this? "I don't know. But whoever leaked it has you cornered," Alex snapped. "It's everything, personal stuff, financial mismanagement, even embezzlement. You're looking at a criminal investigation, Richard. You need to get ahead of this before the media sinks its teeth into you." Richard's legs went weak, and he sank back onto the couch, clutching his head with one hand, the other still holding the phone. "How the hell do I get ahead of this?" His voice cracked with desperation. "You start by getting your story straight and praying that the board doesn't pull the plug on you completely," Alex replied, his tone hard. "They're already looking for a scapegoat. Right now, that's you." Richard's vision blurred as the world closed in around him. He ended the call without another word and dropped the phone onto the table. His career was slipping through his fingers, crumbling like dust. Across the room, Natalie stood silently, wringing her hands. She looked smaller than before, her confidence and independence shattered. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "We," Richard barked, turning toward her with venom in his eyes. "There's no we anymore, Natalie. You think I care about whatever happens to you now? This is because of you." He pointed at her accusingly, his face twisted in rage. She recoiled, tears welling in her eyes again. "I didn't know this would happen. I didn't want this, Richard." "You didn't want this?" Richard snapped. "Then what did you want? Just a little fun on the side? Some excitement? Well, congratulations. Now we're both ruined." Natalie took a step back, her back hitting the wall as she tried to contain the sobs building up inside her. "We can fix this. We have to," she stammered, her voice pleading. "There's no fixing this," Richard yelled, slamming the folder onto the coffee table. The papers scattered across the surface, the evidence of his downfall now laid bare between them. "Do you even understand what's at stake here? My job, my reputation, my freedom, they're all on the line. And you're just another problem in a long list of problems I have to deal with." Natalie's face crumpled as his words hit her like a slap. "I didn't mean for this to happen. She couldn't finish. There were no words that could explain away the mess they were in." Richard paced the room, muttering to himself, trying to think of a way out. "I need to make some calls. Damage control. Maybe I can salvage something from this." He grabbed his phone again, ignoring Natalie's presence completely. She watched him, feeling the weight of guilt crush her. Everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. Last night, they had been laughing, confident that no one would find out about their affair. Now everything was falling apart, and she had no idea how to stop it. After a few tense moments of silence, she whispered, "What's going to happen to us?" Richard stopped mid-step, his face darkening as he looked at her. "Us? There's no us anymore, Natalie. Whatever we had is dead. You should worry about your own mess, because I'm done cleaning it up for you." His words were cold, final. Natalie felt her heart break all over again, not just from his anger, but from the realization that there was no escape from the nightmare they had created. She was just as ruined as he was. She sat down on the couch beside him, her hands trembling as she looked at the scattered papers. "What do we do now?" Richard didn't look at her. He simply stood up, grabbing his coat from the back of a chair. "You do whatever you want. I'm going to try to save what's left of my life." Without another word, he walked out the door, leaving Natalie alone in the wreckage of their affair. The sound of the door slamming shut echoed through the apartment, a final punctuation mark on the life they had destroyed. As the silence settled, Natalie stared at the mess of papers on the table, her mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. Everything was ruined, and there was no way to fix it. The house felt emptier than ever. Natalie had been gone for hours, and with her departure came a strange, hollow silence. For the first time in years, the tension, the arguments, the lies, it was all gone. I could finally breathe again, but that didn't stop the heaviness in my chest as I stared at the now vacant room. Her suitcase had left imprints on the floor, a reminder of the life we had once shared. It was strange to think that just a few days ago, I had been her husband, unaware of the depth of her betrayal. She hadn't fought, hadn't screamed, or yelled when I told her to leave. She had just stood there, hollow-eyed and broken, knowing she had no more cards to play. When she left, she didn't slam the door. It had closed with a soft click, the final sound of our marriage ending. I found myself pacing the living room that evening, replaying the last few days in my mind. Part of me still couldn't believe how easily the pieces had fallen into place. The quiet revenge I had enacted felt almost too simple. Richard's downfall had been swift, his sins laid bare for the entire company to see. I didn't even have to lift a finger after that first strike. The system had done the rest for me. Richard's financial misdeeds were worse than I'd expected. Once I had sent the evidence to the board, it had taken them less than a week to terminate him. I didn't hear about it from Richard directly. He had disappeared off the radar, probably holed up somewhere, trying to salvage the remnants of his once promising career. The gossip at the company Gala had spread like wildfire, fueled by whispers of the affair, but it was the money, his reckless dealings with company funds, that had sealed his fate. I had half expected Natalie to try and contact me after she left, but she hadn't. Maybe she had finally accepted the reality of her situation. Maybe she understood that there was no way back from what she had done. Or maybe, like Richard, she was just too ashamed to show her face. Weeks passed, and the news of Richard's firing became public knowledge. His name was dragged through the mud, not just for the affair, but for the financial scandals that followed. The company's board made sure his reputation was destroyed. Every whisper about his downfall was laced with bitterness and shock. His friends, colleagues, everyone who had once respected him, now saw him as a pariah. Word spread fast in our industry, and soon enough, no one would even consider hiring him. The once golden boy of the firm was now a cautionary tale of what happens when greed and recklessness catch up with you. Natalie, on the other hand, disappeared into a life of obscurity. The scandal had made sure of that. She tried to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, but it was as if the world had turned its back on her. Former friends distanced themselves, afraid of being caught up in the mess. Her name had become synonymous with betrayal and scandal, and even in our social circles, no one wanted to be seen associating with her. Occasionally, I'd hear a whisper about how she was trying to get by, taking odd jobs and moving from place to place, but she was a ghost now. She didn't have the safety net of Richard's success to lean on anymore, and without his influence, she was left to fend for herself in a world that no longer welcomed her. I never felt the need to check up on her. It wasn't out of cruelty, but because I knew there was no point. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. There was no satisfaction in watching someone suffer. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about moving on. One evening, I found myself in my new apartment, a place that felt more like home than the house I had shared with Natalie ever had. I sat by the large window, a glass of bourbon in my hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, the day's warmth fading into the coolness of night. It was peaceful, a word I hadn't associated with my life in a long time. The apartment was small, but it was mine, completely mine. There was no tension, no secrets hanging in the air. I could wake up every morning knowing that I wasn't living in someone else's lie. That kind of freedom was something I had never truly understood until now. As I sipped my drink, I reflected on the months leading up to this moment. Natalie's betrayal had been a gut-wrenching blow, but in the end, it had given me clarity. She had freed me from a life I hadn't realized was suffocating me. And while I had loved her once, that love had long since been buried under the weight of her deceit. In a way, I didn't hate her anymore. I pitied her, yes, but hate would mean that she still had some power over me, and she didn't. Not anymore. I had taken control of my life, something I had lost long before the affair. She had given me back my independence, even if it had been through betrayal. The sunset outside was beautiful, and as the last sliver of light disappeared, I felt a strange sense of closure. There were no more loose ends to tie up, no more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Everything was out in the open, and I had survived it. Not just survived, but thrived. The phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a message from an old friend, inviting me out for drinks later in the week. I smiled, feeling the ease in my chest that came from knowing I could say yes without hesitation, without worrying about what awaited me at home. I finished my drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass as I stood up and stretched. My new life stretched out in front of me, full of possibilities and free from the toxicity that had once plagued my marriage. There were no regrets anymore, just the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing I had made it through the storm. And on the other side, I had found peace. Natalie and Richard had destroyed themselves in the end. I didn't need to ruin them. They had done that all on their own. And now, as I stood in my apartment, the world quiet and still around me, I felt one thing I hadn't felt in years. I felt free.